The courtroom was so still it could have passed for a painting. Dust hung in the beams of sunlight that filtered through the old windows, catching the edge of the judge's robe and the faint shimmer of worn brass fittings on the benches. The sound of pens scratching against paper echoed louder than usual, the kind of stillness that wasn't just silence, but reverence and a little fear. Something unspoken lingered in the air. And at the center of it all sat a little girl barely 8 legs too short to reach the floor, fingers wound tightly around a faded stuffed bunny that looked like it had been loved through every storm a child shouldn't have to weather. Her name was Alina. She wore a pale yellow dress, the kind you might see in a spring catalog. Not the kind you'd expect in a custody hearing that had pulled in psychologists, attorneys, and court officials from 3 counties. But Alina didn't wear that dress to impress. She wore it because it made her feel brave. And that's what she needed today more than ever. Her mother, seated just behind her with a tissue clenched so tightly it might have torn under the pressure, looked like someone caught between grief and hope. Her fat hair on the other side sat stiff, hollow-eyed, jaw clenched. The tension between them wasn't just emotional. It was history carved into every breath in the room. But Alina wasn't looking at either of them. She was watching a dog. He sat obediently just beyond the polished barrier separating the courtroom floor from the gallery. A golden retriever with a coat like sun-drenched wheat and eyes that had seen more sorrow than most people ever would. He wore a red vest. The letters were clear: service animal. Do not pet. His name was Jasper, and in the past year, he'd done what no medication or therapy session could have found her. Alina hadn't spoken a single word in over 20 months. Not since the night the sirens came. Not since the shaking, the screaming, the silence that followed when her world split in half. When the man she used to call Daddy had turned into someone unrecognizable. She'd come back, physically, but her voice hadn't. Until Jasper. The court had allowed him to accompany her under the psychologist's testimony that this wasn't just an emotional support animal. Jasper was Alina's translator, her bridge to a world she no longer trusted. Judge Marla Kent, a woman known for her iron composure and an unwavering sense of order, leaned forward from her towering bench. Her glasses perched low on her nose, a legal pad in front of her, but her gaze was focused squarely on the little girl before her. "Alina," she said, voice softer than expected. "You don't have to speak if you're not ready. You can shake your head or nod. You can answer however you like. No movement, just a flicker of breath. Then, a glance almost imperceptible toward Jasper. Then happened. Alina raised her right hand and made a tiny circular motion in the air with her pinky finger. It was nothing less than a whisper of movement. But Jasper moved. His ears perked. He rose, silently padded up the aisle, slipped past the barrier as if he belonged more than anyone else in the room, and sat beside the witness, stand calm, tall, steady. Another signal. Alina tapped her chest twice. Jasper barked. Just once. It wasn't loud, but it was sharp, intentional. It cracked the silence like lightning across glass. A collective pause. Judge Kent's brow furrowed. What does that mean? A woman in a charcoal suit stepped forward from the rear of the courtroom. Dr. Rowan Miles, Alina's lead trauma specialist. Her voice was careful, controlled, but trembling just beneath the surface. That's the code sequence we developed together. Jasper and Alina have practiced it for nearly a year. That bark means, I'm ready, and she wants you to see something. She held up a small envelope. She gave this to me yesterday, said, and I quote, "If Jasper barks, give this to the judge." The bailiff took the envelope, passed it to Judge Kent. Silence again. Inside the envelope was a hand-drawn picture. Crayons. Simple but detailed. A little girl, cowering in the corner of a living room, her small arms over her head. Towering above her was a man-face contorted in rage, fists clenched. But in the corner of the drawing was Jasper, standing between them, barking. Judge Kent flipped it over. Block letters, uneven but clear. He says he loves me, but I'm only safe when he's gone. A ripple of emotion swept through the room. Audible gasps. Whispers. The father shot to his feet. This is outrageous. That's just a drawing. A dog can't testify. Judge Kent slammed her gavel down once. Sit down. He hesitated, then dropped into his seat. Jasper remained still. Alina's eyes never left him. Then, from the girl's lips, came the first sound the courtroom had heard from her in nearly 2 years. Jasper knows, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Raspy, broken. But there. Real. He remembers what I couldn't. He kept me safe. The room stilled again. Even the court reporter had stopped typing. Judge Kent stared for a long moment. Then she looked to the mother. Effective immediately. Full custody is granted to MS. Rain Hartley. The mother burst into sobs. Relief, heartbreak, and justice all colliding at once. The father tried again to interject. But this time, the bailiff stepped forward. No words were needed. He understood. Judge Kent gathered her papers, rose from her bench, and began to speak. But then she paused. She looked at Alina. Then Jasper. You've said more with one signal than some people say in 1,000 words, she murmured. And more truth than most adults dare to speak. Then she placed the gavel back on the bench, not in authority, but in reverence. 6 months later, the wind was gentler. The park smelled like sunlight and grass. Alina sat on a bench, sketching with colored pencils in a notebook that had once been filled with silence. Jasper lay beside her, eyes half-lidded, tail thumping lazily. A boy, maybe 7, wandered up with a juice box in one hand. Hey, he asked, can I pet your dog? Alina looked up, smiled. Only if you ask him first. The boy blinked. How do I do that? She tapped her chest twice. Jasper barked once and wagged his tail. And Alina laughed. Not a polite giggle, not a careful chuckle, but a full, radiant laugh. The kind of laugh that said a bridge was being rebuilt, that the path from fear to healing had begun. Because sometimes the strongest guardians don't wear badges. They don't speak in courtrooms or write laws. Sometimes they walk on 4 legs. And sometimes the quietest voices carry the weight of the loudest truths.